Greetings from Wyoming. OSY Guy here, and this is my review of Ubuntu Gnome 17.04. This will be my third review of Ubuntu Gnome. I did a review on 16.04 and 16.10, and so I'm looking forward to this review now. There has been a latest development here that's just happened recently, where Mark Shuttleworth, the CEO of the company that's behind the Ubuntu distribution, has decided to move their default desktop environment from Unity to GNOME. And so by the time we get to Ubuntu 18.04 next year, I assume I'm probably going to do a review of that one, and when I do, I probably will not need to say Ubuntu GNOME anymore because that'll be redundant. There are several variants of the GNOME desktop environment interface. GNOME 3, when it came out, was not particularly popular with the Ubuntu developers, and so they developed Unity, and Linux Mint didn't like either GNOME 3 or Unity, and so they did Cinnamon. And lately there's another distribution called Solus OS that came out with Budgie, and Mate is being actively developed by the Ubuntu Mate team. All of those are actually terrific desktop environments, but I continue to like the GNOME 3 environment. I just find it to be the most comfortable. In my mind, the GNOME 3 environment is an uncluttered, minimalist interface, and so I'm going to hold down Control-Alt and press the down arrow and slide to a new workspace. When you take note of the interface here, it's a very uncluttered interface where you just simply have a panel across the top of the screen, and that's it. But you can expose an alternate screen by either tapping the logo key on your keyboard or clicking on the word Activities, and that will bring you over into what's called the Activities Overview, where you will see what was a hidden dock of your favorite applications on the left-hand side. They don't call it a dock in the GNOME environment, they call it a dash. And there is a default list of programs here that some of them you will use, some of them you won't. And so it's very easy to manipulate that. If, for instance, you don't want to have the software icon listed here, you can right-click it and just select Remove from Favorites. If you don't see your particular program in the list, you can always just click on Show Applications, and that will open up what is the first in the set of 3 different screenfuls, in my case, of programs. Up at the top middle portion of the screen, there is a search box. You don't have to click your mouse into that search box. You can just simply start typing, and you can type in the title of a document or the name of a program, either one, and this will find it very easily for you. It's a very convenient interface in that regard. In addition to the far left-hand corner is the middle of the panel where you've got the time showing, and when you click on that, you will see a listing of any notifications that you have, and a calendar, and they also recently have added in a tiny little weather app down at the bottom, which is a nice additional feature that's showing up in GNOME Shell 3.24. Over on the far right side, the system menu, I think, is what they sometimes will call it, and this is a place where you can adjust your volume levels and make changes to your network connections, and get access to all the other settings here like this, and of course there's a spot there for turning off your computer as well. What I really have liked about the GNOME 3 interface is the way that it handles windows. So I'm going to open up a new window here in my second workspace. I'm going to press the logo key and start typing in the word tweak. And I don't have to click with the mouse on the tweak tool. I can just hit the enter key and that'll open up. Now, and this is actually the maybe a supplement, you might say, to the settings that we just looked at. But this is specifically settings for the GNOME environment. And but I just want to use this to demonstrate how you can move windows around inside this environment. Now, of course, like all environments, or like most environments, you can click and drag your mouse on the title bar to move the window around. But with the addition of the Shift key on your keyboard, as I start moving towards the left-hand corner, here's the Shift key. It just automatically pops over to the left corner. And I'll just move the mouse just a little bit, goes over to the right corner, move it down a little bit, move it left a little bit, so I can move this window very precisely around with minimal mouse movements. I'm going to release the Shift key, and then it will just pop back over to that location. So actually, I would like to put it in the left-hand corner. So I'll hold down the Shift key and pop it over there. Now I'm going to open up another program, another window of text editor called Get It. And you will see that we did kind of an informal tiling here. This is just the way that the GNOME environment behaves. So as you open a second window, the two windows will just try to line up side by side like this. Now, if they don't line up side by side, let's say that it shows up over here instead, I can hold down the Shift key as I click and drag that title bar and very easily put it in place like that. Or I can move just a little farther to the right, or downwards, or to the left, a little bit more to the left, and then up again. You see how it just tries to match up to the window borders like that. So that's just a really nice behavior that I have appreciated for quite some time in the GNOME environment. Just to make this look maybe a little bit a little prettier, so to speak, I will hold down the Shift key and drag the border of the tweak tool, and then it lines up like that. So it's just a very enjoyable, quick handling of open windows. Also, now there is there are keyboard shortcuts that are built into Ubuntu in Unity, in GNOME, and in Mate, and they're all based on holding down the Control and the Alt keys, and then selecting a number on your number pad. And so if I hold down Control Alt and press the left-hand top corner keypad number 7, it'll pop into the left-hand corner. Number 9 goes to the right-hand top corner. Number 3 goes to the bottom right. Number 1 goes to the bottom left. And now I'm going to use another one that I had to make a small change to make this work. But the number 5 can be reprogrammed so that it will go to the middle of the screen like this. There was a small change that had to be made for that, so I'll show you that here shortly. But this ability to move around windows without having to use the mouse, just use keyboard shortcuts, I really like that capability. So what I'm referring to there is that there's a utility called Decomp. I assume it probably means desktop configuration editor. And when you open up the Decomp editor, you just simply follow this path all the way to WM, which I believe is window manager, and then key bindings, and then you'll have to. Now I just use the Control Alt 5 like this to move my open window to the middle of the screen like that. If you do that before you make the change inside of the Decomp editor, it will maximize like this instead. So I will, and I'm using the other keyboard shortcut for this, which is the logo key, and the up arrow will maximize a window as well. So I'll do logo down arrow just to get it back to that position. And then I'd like to also move it back over to the top left-hand corner. So I'll press Control-Alt-7 to do that. All of that can be accomplished by, you'll have to make a change to the settings for the maximize key binding and for the toggle maximized key binding. Both of those have more than one keyboard shortcut in them, but they include the shortcut that I like to use to put a window into the center of the screen. So if you go to the maximize and toggle maximized and remove the primary alt key, KP_5 from each of those listings, then you will be able to reprogram the keyboard number 5 key to move to center in the Decomp editor, and just make sure to use this syntax that I show you here, and that'll work very well for you. Now the keyboard shortcuts for moving these windows around are just a natural part right now of the Ubuntu interface, whether it's GNOME or Unity or Mate or whatever. Unfortunately, they're not the default in other distributions of Linux, and so if you're running Fedora or something like that, you try those keyboard shortcuts, they don't work. But because I like those keyboard shortcuts so much, I will open up the Decomp editor in Fedora, for instance, and I will add in all the key bindings and just take about 5-10 minutes to get those entries in place. And when you do that, then you know, that keeps you from having to add an extension. There has been an extension out for quite some time that is called Put Windows, and a little bit quirky. It works okay, but I really like to use the configurations in the Decomp editor. They're quite efficient and they do very nicely, and it means you don't have to add another extension if you don't have to. Now, the statistics I'd like to just have you know about is that I do have 2 laptops, 2 desktops. They're all System 76 machines, which is a terrific way to go. If you're using Linux, then System 76 is certainly a terrific way to go. On all of those machines, I have solid-state drives, so I get good performance anyway. But the boot time in 17.04 is 10 seconds, so it's very quick. The GNOME Shell version in 17.04 is version 3.24. The kernel is 4.10. However, there are some utilities. For instance, the file manager called Nautilus is not 3.24. It is 3.20. There is also the default window manager, so to speak, or the display manager, I think is what they call it, is X11. Wayland is the way that we are eventually going, and that's the way of the future. But I still find I have run it every now and then just for an experiment, and seems like everything's fine, and then suddenly I will see a slowdown, and I won't even remember that I had turned on Wayland, and I'll wonder why I'm having some strange moments in the interface. So I still find that X11 is the best choice at this point. Now you can add all kinds of GNOME extensions, and they are configurable through the tweak tool that you just saw just a bit ago. But you can go to the website called extensions.gnome.org. They are including, the Ubuntu Gnome team have included a system helper file that you used to have to, you had to add in if you were in 16.10 and you were trying to use the extensions.gnome.org. You had to add in a PPA that where you could put in the latest version of GNOME or Chrome-GNOME-shell, which is a little bit of a misnomer in that this will work for both Firefox and Chrome, but you don't have to add that anymore. That's already pre-installed, and then you can just add all kinds of extensions. Now, if you narrow down your extensions at the extensionsgnome.org website, the extensions will go from 81 pages down to 12 pages. Each page has got 10 extensions, so the ones that specifically apply to 3.24, there are 12 pages worth of extensions, so probably around 120 or so possible extensions that you could add. Some of the extensions they imitate other desktop environments. One of them is called Applications. If you turn on the Applications extension, you'll find that you get an Applications word up here at the top left-hand corner, and when you click on it, it drops down and shows you the categories of extensions that you got, or the categories of programs that you typically see when you're in the Mate environment. And so that's somewhat of an imitation of Mate. There are several Unity imitation extensions. One of them is Dash to Dock, which takes the dash on the left-hand side here and makes it visible in the regular desktop view as well as in the activities view. And so you can add that and have it behave a little bit more like Unity. I don't do that one because I do like the cleaner interface. But this app keys is another item from the Unity realm, and it worked like this: that when you were looking at the launcher inside of Unity, all of your programs listed down the left-hand side were accessible through a keyboard shortcut of the logo key and the number 1 key for your first app that's in the list, number 2 for the second in the list. So if I press logo 3, I'm going to open up Simple Scan in my case, and so I do use the app keys and add that as an extension. I also put in the extension called No Top Left Corner. There is the default behavior in GNOME is that the top left-hand corner, if it's nudged by your mouse, you will automatically switch over to the activities overview like this. And I don't like that behavior. I like to have it only be available when I tap the logo key or I click the activities button. So the no top left corner is a nice extra feature that I appreciate. I always add the ping indicator. That's this item up here that identifies the speed of the internet here for actually it's pointing to the 8.8.8.8 Google DNS server right now. That's reconfigurable if you want to, but just nice to have a ping indicator running. And I also always add top icons to my list of extensions. There is an interesting behavior to when you add certain programs. I'll use my example here of Dropbox. When I add Dropbox, the icon for Dropbox will actually show up in the bottom left-hand corner. And there's a kind of a leftover vestigial menu, if you want to call it. It's a leftover panel from the GNOME 2 days where you had both a top and a bottom panel. This is a collapsible bottom panel that is by default shows up in GNOME 3. And so if you want to access the Dropbox icon, you have to click on the chevron at the bottom of the screen and slide that in order to get access to it. And there are some other programs that will use that bottom section also, like Clementine, which is a music player, will add its icon there too. And I never use the bottom left-hand corner, so Top Icons Plus really works well for me, and it shifts the icons up to the top bar instead. And so I like that characteristic. So I always add Top Icons Plus. What do I like in a distro? Well, I like extremely fast installation and upgrades, and Ubuntu 17.04 definitely meets that, hands down. Maybe one of the fastest installations that you can run across. We're talking about installing and having a completely upgraded, up-to-date Ubuntu in 15-20 minutes maximum. So it's a very, very quick install, and I do like clean startups and clean shutdowns with minimal error messages showing up, and that is certainly the case inside of Ubuntu. I look for stability and reliability, and of course I just mentioned that I prefer to use the X11 environment instead of the Wayland environment because Wayland, I still think they're chasing down some bugs and issues with that. So for now, X11 works out to be my best daily driver choice. I really like the Alt F2 commands that are part of the GNOME 3 environment. If you press Alt F2, you can type in a command here, and if I type in the word power off and hit the enter key, I'll be shutting down the computer without ever having to use the mouse at all. The reboot command works very well in there. Just the letter R and then press enter will refresh GNOME Shell. All of those are very nice. I do like also in a Linux distribution, I really like to have extensive repositories available, and that certainly is the case as far as Ubuntu is concerned. They've got some obviously very large repositories, and when you can't find something in the repository, there are many repositories. That's what I call them. They're PPAs, stand for Personal Package Archives. But they are basically, it's like you're just adding a side repository into your list, and so you can add things that way as well. And if you can find Debian installer programs, those are very compatible inside of Ubuntu also. I use TeamViewer, and so very easily installed by downloading the teamviewer.deb file. Just mention briefly that there was a flaw back over in Ubuntu GNOME 16.04, and I saw it happen again in 17.04. That the default behavior is when you double click on a deb file, it'll show up in the software center, and it did in this case, and then it would not install in the software center. And so I used the software center to download the program called gdebi, and then install the Debian package that way, and that works very well. They may have already fixed that. I'm not sure if maybe now if you install Ubuntu GNOME 17.04, maybe the software center works just fine that way as well, but just be warned that you may need to do the gdebi instead. Now, just some quick complaints that I had as I was getting ready to put in the official version of Ubuntu GNOME 17.04. I found that I was looking at other distros as well. I always like to look at anything else that runs the GNOME interface very well, and so obviously one of the places where GNOME is heavily supported is in Fedora, and the very convenient version of Fedora is called Corora. That's a terrific distribution that includes multimedia codecs, and it already has the RPM Fusion repositories in place, so it makes it like the lazy man's quick way to get Fedora up and running. So I really like that one. But I did see after I would install either Corora or Fedora, as soon as I would run the DNF upgrade, that was a pretty lengthy process, maybe about a half an hour. So I didn't like how long that took. And in the Fedora environment, I do often see minor error messages that show up at startup, messages that actually get filtered out in Ubuntu, and so I get a cleaner startup. And then also there is a when I was running, this was Corora and Fedora 25. They were showing some a very cluttered shutdown screen with a repeated semaphore error that was showing up, and I kept trying to get the latest kernel updates and trying to fix that problem, and I never did get that resolved, so that was a bit of a hassle. Also, SE Linux is built into Fedora and Corora, security enhanced Linux. And there are some hassles that I was having with that. I was trying to get that Fedora computer to be available through the GNOME environment. I was trying to say allow remote desktop, and it was just a real hassle. Even though that's built into GNOME, the security enhanced Linux was just a kind of a painful experience to try to figure out how to get a hole in there to get that to work. Wayland is the default interface for Fedora and Corora, and it's not X Wayland, it is Wayland, and that turns out to be a problem for remote desktop programs like TeamViewer and Ramina. You have to switch over to the X11 environment in the case of Fedora to get the to get those programs to work right. So those were my shortcomings that I saw for the Fedora realm. Now I also was checking out Manjaro, and I had a USB flash disk to install Manjaro, and I would start the installation procedure, and it would get to the point where it would ask for do you want to format your drive, and I would say yes, and then it would get stuck there. And so I basically had to boot into the Manjaro install disk twice just so that I could finish my installation of Manjaro. Didn't like that problem as it cropped up, and I also saw a lot of minor error messages displaying in startup. And there was one thing that kind of turned into a deal breaker for me. I would and this was on two different installs on two different, one was a laptop, one was a desktop. I would get a 90-second delay in order to shut down the computer. That was pretty off-putting. I tried Antergos. It does have a long installation build, but after it was done, I tried to install my printer, and I could not get it to install, and that was a deal breaker for me there as well. Now, I do have a few complaints about Ubuntu Gnome. It's a combination good thing, bad thing, but in the 3.24 GNOME shell, kind of cool, it installs your printer. You can't get to your printer utility fast enough to install the printer. That's the good thing. I don't mind that. I think that's great. I mean, it wasn't like it was particularly painful to install a printer in the past anyway. But the downside about it is that every time you start up your computer on a new day, you're going to get a notification pop-up that will say that your printer is being installed again. And that part I don't like as well, so I go to the settings panel, and I locate the item called notifications, and I turn off notification pop-ups because I don't want to have my screen interrupted with messages that I really don't care about. There's also another one that was kind of it's actually been around since Ubuntu Gnome 17.04. I would get an occasional message, and it wouldn't even come into the notification section. It would just pop up on the screen and tell me that I had a crash, and it might be maybe a crash that was related to the GNOME Display Manager GDM, or maybe it was a Plymouth error or whatever. But they were all minor errors and completely not helpful. And so I found those to be just more of an irritant than anything else. And so every time I'm done installing Ubuntu Gnome on the computer, the first thing I do is I open up a terminal prompt and I type in sudo nano, and then I go to this /etc/default/app and that just opens up the a very simple editor inside of the terminal called Nano, and that's where you can change a setting that is labeled enabled equals 1, and you change enabled equals 1 to enabled equals 0, and that will turn off those crash reports. And so that's my way to get around that issue. So other than those particular complaints, I find that Ubuntu Gnome is fast, it installs fast, it boots up fast, it shuts down fast, it has great reliability. I just really like Ubuntu Gnome 17.04, so my hat's off to the GNOME developers. They've done a nice job with Ubuntu Gnome, and my hat's off to them. And so thank you for watching my videos, and keep an eye out for future videos from OSY Guy. Thanks. Bye-bye.